In 2019, a man stood in front of the graduating class of Morehouse College and made them a promise that left grown men in tears. He was going to pay off their student loans, all of them, nearly 400 graduates, around $34 million of debt, erased in a single sentence. The man was Robert Frederick Smith, and at that moment, he was the richest black man in America, worth more than $10 billion. But here's what almost nobody in that stadium knew. At the very same time he was being celebrated as the most generous black philanthropist alive, federal agents had spent 4 years building a case against him. A year later, he would sign a confession admitting to one of the largest individual tax fraud schemes in the history of the United States. So how does the same man become both? The hero who freed a graduating class and the billionaire who hid money offshore for 15 years? To answer that, you have to understand how Robert Smith got rich in the first place, because his fortune didn't come from oil or tech or anything you'd expect. It came from the most boring product on earth, software you've never heard of, running quietly inside companies you'll never see. I went looking for how he built it. What I found is one of the most brilliant money machines in modern finance, and a story about what success costs. This is the rise of Robert F. Smith. Robert Smith was not born poor. That matters, because it makes his story different from almost every other rags to riches billionaire you've heard about. He was born in Denver, Colorado in 1962, the fourth generation of his family born in that state. And his parents were not struggling. His mother and father both held doctorates in education. His father was an elementary school principal. His mother ran a Denver high school. This was a black household built entirely on the idea that education was the way up. And his mother taught him something else. Every single month, no matter how tight things were, she sent $25 to the United Negro College Fund. $25 for over 50 years. Young Robert watched that happen his whole childhood. You give back. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. There's one more detail from his earliest days that's almost too perfect. When Smith was 9 months old, his mother carried him to Washington, D.C. She took him to the March on Washington, the day Martin Luther King delivered the I Have a Dream speech. Smith was there, an infant in his mother's arms, on the most important day in the history of the movement. He wouldn't remember it, but it would define the story he told about himself for the rest of his life. Now here's where the engine starts. As a teenager, Smith got obsessed with science, and he wanted an internship at Bell Labs, the legendary research lab that practically invented the modern world. There was just one problem. The internship was only for college students. Smith was still in high school. Most kids would have walked away. Smith didn't. He called and called and called again, week after week, refusing to take no for an answer. Eventually, they gave in, just to deal with this relentless teenager. He got the spot, and inside Bell Labs, he met something he'd never seen before. Black scientists at the top of their field, doing serious work. That internship turned into a job that helped pay for college, and it taught him the lesson that runs through his entire life: tenacity. You don't ask for the door to open, you knock until it does. Smith went to Cornell and earned a degree in chemical engineering in 1985. He was good at it. He worked at Goodyear and at Kraft doing applied research, and he ended up holding multiple patents in the United States and Europe. On paper, he was on track to be a brilliant engineer for the rest of his life. That engineering mind matters more than it sounds. A chemical engineer is trained to take a messy, inefficient process and tune it, input by input, until it runs clean. Smith would later do the exact same thing to companies. Where other financiers saw spreadsheets, he saw systems to be optimized. The discipline he learned standing over industrial processes became the discipline he'd use to squeeze profit out of software firms. But Smith had noticed the same thing every future billionaire eventually notices. The engineers build the products, other people build the wealth, so he made a hard turn. He went to Columbia Business School and earned his MBA in 1994. And then he walked into the most important building of his career, Goldman Sachs. At Goldman, Smith landed in mergers and acquisitions, advising technology companies. This was the 1990s. The tech boom was exploding, and Smith was in the room helping software companies buy and sell each other, learning exactly how they made money from the inside. This was the real education. Not Cornell, not Columbia, Goldman. Smith got a front row seat to billion-dollar deals. He saw which software companies were worth a fortune and which were hype. He learned how buyers valued them, how sellers dressed them up and where the hidden money was buried. Most bankers just close the deal and move on. Smith was studying the game like a man planning to flip the table. He moved from New York to San Francisco, right to the edge of Silicon Valley. And while he was there, advising on tech deals, he started to see a pattern that everyone else was ignoring. The flashy companies got all the headlines, but the truly unkillable businesses were the boring ones, the companies that made software other companies couldn't function without. There was also a man he met during these years, a Houston software mogul named Robert Brockman. Brockman ran a company that made software for car dealerships, dull, profitable, and exactly the kind of business Smith was learning to love. Remember that name. Brockman is going to make Smith rich, and decades later, Brockman is going to nearly destroy him. In 2000, Smith made his move. He left Goldman Sachs to start his own private equity firm. He called it Vista Equity Partners, and to launch it, he needed serious money. Brockman offered to back the very first fund, more than $1 billion. It was the deal that built an empire. It was also the deal that planted a bomb under it, but we'll get to that. For now, just understand this. A kid who knocked his way into Bell Labs had just talked his way into $1 billion, and he was about to do something with it that almost no one in finance fully understood. So what does Vista Equity Partners actually do? And how does it turn boring software into a $10 billion fortune? Let me show you the machine, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Vista is a private equity firm, but it is not like the others. Most private equity firms will buy anything: a hotel chain, a hospital, a candy company. Vista does one thing and only one thing. It buys enterprise software companies, specifically business-to-business software, the unglamorous programs that run the back office of the modern economy. Think about the software a hospital uses to schedule its surgeries, the system a bank uses to process loans, the program a city uses to manage its water bills. You've never heard of these companies, but the organizations that run on them cannot turn them off, not for a single day. And that is the entire secret. I call it the toll booth. Here's what that means. When a company installs a piece of software deep inside its operations, ripping it out later is a nightmare. You'd have to retrain everyone, move all your data, and risk everything breaking. So the company just keeps paying. Year after year after year, the software becomes a toll booth on the road of that company's business. Every time they operate, they pay the toll. Robert Smith understood something most investors missed. These boring companies were quietly the best businesses in the world. Predictable revenue, customers who can never leave, and almost no one was competing to buy them because they weren't sexy. And the revenue doesn't come once, it comes on a subscription. The customer pays every month or every year, automatically, forever. In the investing world, there's a name for this: recurring revenue. And it's the most prized cash flow on earth because you can predict it years in advance. A software company with locked-in subscribers isn't a business, it's an annuity. Smith was buying annuities while everyone else was gambling on the next big thing. Over the years, Vista's portfolio swelled with names most people have never heard of, but millions of businesses rely on: identity security firms, sports data companies, billing systems, marketing platforms, each one a quiet toll booth, together an empire. So Vista went hunting, and when it buys a software company, it doesn't just sit back and collect the toll. This is the part that makes Vista different. It runs the company harder. Vista developed a set of playbooks, a standard operating system for running software businesses, detailed best practices for how to price the product, how to sell it, how to hire, how to cut waste. When Vista buys a company, it doesn't reinvent the wheel. It drops in a proven formula that has worked across dozens of other software companies it already owns. Smith even brought his engineering brain to hiring. Vista became famous for giving job candidates an aptitude test, measuring how people think and solve problems, not just where they went to school. The firm treated people like a system to be optimized, the same way an engineer optimizes a chemical process. Now watch how the money actually multiplies. Vista buys a software company, often using borrowed money to do it. Then it applies the playbook. It raises prices the customers can't escape. It trims the fat. It makes the company more profitable. A few years later, it sells that improved company, or takes it public, for far more than it paid. Then it does the whole thing again, and again, and again. This is the flywheel. Buy, improve, sell, repeat. Each turn, throws off enormous profits, and a big slice of those profits flows straight to Smith and his firm. Let me put real numbers on it so you can feel how the wealth gets made. Say Vista buys a software company for $1 billion. It doesn't pay all of that in cash. It might put in $300 million of its investors' money and borrow the other $700 million. Then it goes to work, raising prices, cutting costs, pushing the playbook. A few years later, the company's profits have doubled, and Vista sells it for $2 billion. After paying back the loan, the gain on that $300 million has multiplied several times over. That is the magic of private equity. You use other people's money to buy, and a little improvement at the top turns into a massive return at the bottom. Now multiply that across dozens of companies over 20 years, and you start to see the scale of what Smith built. Vista wasn't running one of these plays. It was running them constantly in parallel, with a discipline that felt more like a factory than a fund. And there's a reason the model is so hard to copy. The hardware of it, the money, the lawyers, the bankers, anyone can buy. The software of it is different. The playbooks, the data on what actually makes a software company grow, the trained teams who've done it 50 times. That took Smith 2 decades to build. A rival can raise a fund overnight. They cannot download 20 years of pattern recognition, and the returns were staggering. For 2 decades, Vista reportedly generated around 30% annual returns for its investors. In a world where most funds are thrilled to beat 10%, that number is almost unbelievable. It made Vista one of the most sought-after firms in finance. Pension funds, universities, and the ultra-wealthy lined up to hand Smith their money. Look at what that built. As of early 2026, Vista manages around $107 billion in assets. Read that again, $107 billion. By 2019, if you added up all the software companies Vista controlled, it was effectively the 4th largest enterprise software company on Earth, behind only Microsoft, Oracle, and SAP. A man most Americans have never heard of had quietly assembled a software empire that rivaled the biggest names in tech. And because Vista is private, Smith owns the majority of it. There's no public stock, no army of shareholders splitting the rewards. When his firm wins, he wins. That ownership is what turned a Denver engineer into a billionaire many times over. But the machine alone doesn't explain Robert Smith. Plenty of investors chase software. Something set him apart and lifted him to the very top, and then made him one of the most talked about black men in America. To understand that, you have to look at what he did with the money. Here's the question. There are hundreds of private equity billionaires in America. Most of them you couldn't name if your life depended on it. So why did Robert Smith become a household name? The answer is his edge, and it has 2 sides. The first side is the one we just saw. Smith saw value where the rest of Wall Street saw boredom. While other investors fought over glamorous startups, he built a fortress out of the software nobody wanted to talk about. He turned boring into a competitive weapon. That's the business edge. But the second side is what made him famous. Robert Smith decided to become the most visible black philanthropist in America, and he did it on a scale the country had never seen. It started with that $25 a month his mother sent to the college fund. Smith took that lesson and multiplied it by his fortune. In 2017, he became the first Black American ever to sign the Giving Pledge, the public promise by the world's richest people to give away at least half their wealth. He didn't just join the club, he planted a flag for everyone who looked like him. Then came Morehouse in 2019, the student debt moment that opened this video. But the story is even bigger than that day. Smith didn't just clear the graduates' loans, he extended it to cover the debt their parents had taken on to put them through school. Then, he turned it into something permanent, the Student Freedom Initiative, seeded with $50 million, designed to give students at black colleges an alternative to crushing loans for years to come. In his speech, Smith gave the graduates a charge. He told them he was putting a little fuel in your bus, and asked them to do the same for the classes that followed. Think about the ripple. 400 young men walked into adulthood with no debt anchor, no reason to take the safe, soul-killing job just to make a loan payment. They were free to start companies, take risks, build nonprofits, swing for the fences. That's the real gift. Not the money itself, but the years of freedom the money bought. And the giving kept going. $20 million to help build the National Museum of African American History and Culture. $50 million to his old engineering school at Cornell. A foundation aimed squarely at preserving Black culture and opening doors for Black students. Internship programs to push young people of color into careers that had always been closed to them. This is the deeper impact. Smith wasn't just writing checks. He was attacking the exact machinery that keeps wealth out of Black hands. Student debt, the lack of access to capital, the closed networks of elite finance. He had climbed inside the most exclusive room in American money, and he was trying to prop the door open behind him. Think about what that means for representation. For generations, the image of Black success in America was narrow. The stage, the field, the microphone. Smith offered something different. A Black man at the absolute summit of high finance, not performing, but owning, allocating capital, deciding which companies live and die. For a young person who's brilliant with numbers, that picture changes what feels possible. And there's a structural piece underneath the symbolism. When a Black billionaire controls $100 billion in capital, he can point some of it at problems the market ignores. He can fund internships that feed Black students into technology careers. He can build financing that doesn't bury them in debt. He can write the kind of checks to Black institutions that change their entire trajectory. That's not charity in the soft sense. That's redirecting the flow of capital itself, the most powerful force in the economy, toward people who've been locked out of it for centuries. One man can't fix that gap. But Smith proved a single person at the top can bend the pipe. Now, let me step back for a second because this is the part of the story that gets complicated. Robert Smith does not live like the quiet, modest billionaire. He lives large, and he doesn't hide it. He owns homes in France, in New York, in Colorado, in California wine country, in Austin, in Malibu. In 2015, he married Hope Dworacek, a former model, in a lavish ceremony in Italy. John Legend performed at the wedding. He even bought a piece of history, a property in the Colorado mountains called Lincoln Hills, once a famous resort for Black families back in the 1920s when most vacation spots were segregated. Smith turned it into an exclusive, invitation-only club where he hosts musicians and brings in underprivileged schoolchildren to experience the outdoors. So this is the full picture of his edge. A ruthless eye for boring, money-printing software, a genuine history-making commitment to lifting his community, and a taste for the finest things that fortune can buy. All in one man. It was a near-perfect story, the engineer who became a billionaire and gave it back. But near-perfect is not perfect. And in 2020, the other half of the story finally caught up with him. For 4 years, while Robert Smith was being celebrated on magazine covers, the federal government was quietly investigating him. The investigation led straight back to that first deal, the $1 billion from Robert Brockman that launched Vista in 2000. According to Smith's own later admission, Brockman didn't just hand over the money, he dictated the terms. The deal required setting up an offshore trust in the Cayman Islands, structured to hide the earnings from American tax authorities. It was, in Smith's words, a take-it-or-leave-it offer. A young investment banker in his 30s, 4 years out of business school, was handed a $1 billion opportunity with a poison pill baked inside. Smith took the deal, and for the next 15 years, the money he earned through that offshore structure went untaxed. He used secret accounts overseas. He failed to report the income. Prosecutors said he evaded taxes on a fortune flowing through those hidden entities. Then, in October 2020, it ended. Robert Smith signed a non-prosecution agreement with the Justice Department. In plain language, he admitted he had broken the law. He confessed to what the government called an illegal scheme to conceal income and evade taxes. The price was steep. He agreed to pay $139 million in back taxes and penalties. He gave up a separate claim for $182 million in charitable tax deductions. And most importantly, he agreed to cooperate, to testify against his old benefactor, Robert Brockman. But here is what stunned a lot of people. Robert Smith did not go to prison. He did not even get charged with a crime. He kept control of his firm. He kept his fortune. He kept his life. Critics were furious. Former prosecutors said the deal proved a hard truth, that a billionaire with the right lawyers can buy his way out of trouble that would land an ordinary person in a cell. One called it a message that the wealthy are simply treated differently. It's a fair criticism, and the story can't pretend otherwise. There's a more sympathetic reading too, and it deserves a hearing. Some pointed out that Smith was young when he signed that first deal, that the structure was forced on him by a far more powerful man, and that in the years since, he gave away more money than he ever hid. Both things can be true at once. He committed the crime, and he was the junior partner in a scheme designed by someone else. As for Brockman, the man who started it all, he was charged with hiding $2 billion from the government in what prosecutors called the largest individual tax fraud case in American history. He never faced a jury. He died in 2022 while his trial was still pending. Years later, his estate agreed to pay the government $750 million to settle. And Smith? He has spent the years since trying to move past it. Reports in 2026 revealed he had even hired a firm to clean up how his tax case appears in online searches. The philanthropist who built his name on transparency was paying to soften his own record. Sit with that irony for a second. The same man who stood on a stage and told 400 young men to live free was quietly trying to scrub his own history off the internet. It's a very human contradiction. We want to be remembered for our best day, not our worst. But when you've made your name on doing good, the cover-up cuts deeper than the crime. And it raises a question the story can't dodge. Was the giving real, or was it a strategy? The honest answer is probably both. The money he gave was real, and it changed real lives. The timing also happened to help a man under federal investigation look like a saint. People are rarely all one thing, Smith least of all. So let me leave you with 3 predictions. First, Robert Smith's legacy will never be simple again. He will always be 2 things at once, the man who freed the Morehouse class and the man who signed the confession. History will argue about him for decades, and both sides will be right. Second, Vista's toll booth model isn't going anywhere, but it faces a new threat. Artificial intelligence is starting to make software cheaper and easier to replace. The companies that were impossible to rip out may not stay that way forever. Watch whether Smith adapts the machine or whether the toll road slowly cracks. Third, and most important, the deepest mark Robert Smith leaves won't be the homes or the fortune or even the scandal. It will be the nearly 400 young men who walked out of Morehouse with no debt and what they choose to build with the freedom he gave them. Because in the end, Robert Smith is the proof of an uncomfortable idea, that a person can do real harm and real good with the very same hands. That the line between the benefactor and the lawbreaker can run straight through one human being. He knocked until the door opened. He climbed higher than almost any black man in American business ever has. And then he learned the hardest lesson of all, that getting to the top doesn't erase how you got there. The question he leaves us with is the one worth sitting with. When we measure a person's life, what counts more? The good they gave the world or the rules they broke to get there?